You're listening to Mid-Atlantic Gravel, Travel, and Dirt.
Hi, everybody. I'm Brian.
Hi, I'm David Landis, based out of Harrisonburg, Virginia, Shenandoah Valley.
David, you've been on the podcast before. It is fantastic to have you back. We're going to talk about something completely different than what we've talked about before, and I'm excited to dive into that. But for folks, if you're new here, this is a podcast where we talk about gravel bikes, adventure biking, bikepacking, and we're going to talk about sort of like a really cool subset of bikepacking, and that's racing bikepacking this week, bike camping, or just playing bikes. And specifically, David, we're going to talk about the Endless Mountains Challenge. I have two things I want to chat out before we get into that, though. Shameless plug, shill, t-shirts and fun sticker packs from all the logos are still available on the website in short supply, waiting for the first cease and desist order to arrive. So get them before we have to do any redactions or say we can't sell a specific sticker anymore. We push that edge, David. We really have a lot of fun with it, and I think folks are having fun with it as well. I also want to make sure that we send some good vibes to all of our friends down in Grayson Highlands area and throughout Western North Carolina and Virginia and all of those areas that have been impacted by Hurricane Helene. Now, I know, David, you've got a lot of connections down in Grayson. Have you talked to any folks down there, and how are things going for them?
Yeah, I've been in touch with folks in Grayson County, some folks in Damascus, around the New River corridor. They've got hit pretty hard.
Yeah.
The Virginia Southwest was the worst. And some people have seen the images of Damascus kind of underwater that were being taken in the aftermath of this. But yeah, Damascus and Freeze, Galax, those communities were all hit pretty hard by flooding, mostly Saturday. But now they're just sort of figuring out how bad it is, and they have closed the New River Trail, the Virginia Creeper Trail, till further notice. The Creeper Trail is a bunch of bridges out, trestles. Some of the main roads connecting these communities are half missing too, just washed away. So as far as we know, the people we know are safe, but like the rebuilding is pretty significant road ahead. And they've said just hold off on coming right now.
Yeah.
They're directing people to ways they can support, and trying to think of ways to use the bikepacking community in Virginia and beyond to sort of direct resources and funds to those initiatives to help with cleanup and drinking water, food, that kind of stuff.
It's just been devastating to watch the video coverage and the photos and everything come out of that area. And it's, someplace kind of holds a special place in my heart, and for you it does. Mm-hmm. It's just been, and we were talking about this just before we started recording, that, you feel compelled, people feel compelled to want to go see that, but you don't want to be a tourist right now. Please don't go to a place like that that's suffering such devastation and be a tourist. But there's a point in time when the scale does tip during a rebuild process where the money that you can bring to an area, I think, also has value as well. So when that happens, it's impossible to say, but it's way too early for that right now. Mm-hmm. So like Red Cross, and if you want to get some money in some local hands, maybe, David, if you have some resources that I could share in the show notes, that'd be great. Everybody's, cash is king. So send them some love money, I think, is the best thing you can do for folks.
Yeah, exactly. I'm going to post some links in the Bikepacking Virginia group on Facebook and the Trans-Virginia Bikepackers group too, and try to help direct people there. Yeah. And any updates we find out about the routes. I mean, they closed the Appalachian Trail as well. They've closed the Village Parkway. There's a lot of things that are just kind of reevaluating and trying to recover right now.
Yeah, I know that at one point there was a notification just said, I particularly have been watching some of the news out of Western North Carolina. Mm-hmm. I have family connections there in the Banner Elk Boone area, and I know there was a lot of talk. Just consider all of the roads closed was what the word said. So, and obviously I think that's going to change. When it's just so hard to tell. And gas, how can you get to a place? And if you're going to go to a place now, even if you think you're doing good and carrying supplies, you would have to carry your own gas to be able to get back out, or else you're a drain on a resource in a community that doesn't get those resources. So, kind of going through the organized outlets for support, I think is smart. So I've heard from all of the people that I know in Asheville, in that area, that I wanted to make sure to reach out to them and make sure that they were safe and well. So still, it's just devastating for an area. A lot of these folks in those areas don't have a lot to begin with, and now a lot of things have been taken away from them. So it's tough. It's just tough. So we'll share some links, folks. Go over and check out the show notes, and we're going to have some ways that you can support there. So let's talk about some fun stuff. Let's talk about bike packing.
This one.
Yeah. Endless Mountains Challenge. We're specifically going to talk about that. But before we talk about the challenge and the race, I'd love to get a little bit of the backstory on where the route sort of came from and what was the genesis for the idea for it.
Yeah, so it's an interesting story. This region is in northeast Pennsylvania. So
Okay.
for those not familiar with that, just to put it on the map, it's kind of that northeast corner of PA that borders New York State. Scranton is kind of on the southeast end, and like Lock Haven, PA Grand Canyon is just beyond the west. And it's made up of 4 counties. It's a heritage region, which is a regional designation in Pennsylvania to kind of protect the stories and the culture of a region. The idea came from a woman named Donna Iannone, who's from Sullivan County, one of the 4 counties. And she was a gravel cyclist, bike packer, bike tourer. She was the county commissioner of Sullivan County, one of the county commissioners, which is pretty interesting. And she recently retired and biked across the U.S., which is kind of a retirement gift to herself. So she's lived there all her life, and she said, this is such a beautiful area. I want to find a way to share this and have this dream to create a gravel bikepacking route through the region and network the communities. And she had seen the region from sort of the public sector as a municipal county leader, and thought it was a great way to just build up the economy and support, the communities there. So it was originally her idea, and then she brought it to the Heritage Region Committee, this group of counties, and the route was kind of designed by various cyclists and tourism folks, which was interesting from different counties. It was not one person that drew it out, but 4 different initiatives and was pieced together. So they came up with this route, and, some areas were sort of developed more by cyclists, and some were developed more by people who just, were linking together points of interest and visual things. So they were trying to get feedback, and they had a couple people test it out and ride it. And I got connected to them at a gravel conference at State College a few years ago. And they said, hey, would you like to come ride this and give us some feedback? I said, that's great. Yeah, I've not bike packed or ridden gravel bikes there. So I was pretty psyched about that. And then last summer, I helped them with an assessment, rode the route. And we kept trying to figure out how can we, get more gravel, but also go through the communities, because resupply can be kind of tough if you just stay into rural gravel roads. So Donna's dream was always to have a race, kind of like Tour Divide. And that was kind of the intention all along, but the route kind of evolved and became different things over the years. And then we did a big revision last year after my ride too, and made some changes to go directly through communities a little more to kind of connect with the people and for resupply. And, just to make it flow well between all these different sections. So it kind of had a different origin story than a lot of other routes. Yeah. Usually one person's, idea, and they design it, they scout it all out. This one kind of came from a group of, structures, community initiatives, cyclists, municipalities, tourism groups, and was really a collaborative process in the end.
I find that really interesting, because we talk so much about the economic impact of the bike on rural communities and things like that. And, it's so hard sometimes to even find one of them that can kind of grasp that. But then to find a series of several different groups that are able to come together and all have that vision to be able to see further down the road with regard to the impact that something like this can have on a region, and not just one township, one county, or a series of one or two things. That's really cool. That's I think a sign of hopefully a lot of good news there.
Yeah, and it was really exciting for me to dive into this because usually it's an idea I have, or it's an idea one person comes to me and says, "Can you help build this?" So this one was really interesting because it was kind of like supporting something that was already started, getting to that place where it works well, where it flows. But then I had this network of people to coordinate with that reached way more people than like in the local communities than I could myself as one person.
Yeah.
So when that came then to the event, the next thing they wanted to do was to run a self-supported bikepacking race, Grand Depart. Like then we had this network of individuals and organizations to kind of leverage and really get the word out and get excited about the race itself.
What is the shape of the race? It's and let me get the name right. I want to make sure I get the name right. Endless Mountains 430 and 250 challenge. And obviously the 430 and the 250 is either a 430 mile or 250 mile bikepacking loop. So how did this come about?
Well, yeah, so the original loop was a 430 mile loop that goes through these four counties. There's a question of where do we start it, which direction do we put it in. The Endless Mountains central office for promoting the region is in this town of Towanda, which is kind of in the middle of the loop. You can almost see it as a figure 8 or infinity sign, which some people kept alluding to as we kept talking about endless mountains, like trails, endless climb, never end, which came into play in a lot of people's experience. But we decided it flowed better counterclockwise, and the original plan was just to do the 430. But then as we were into the planning about halfway through, we said, well, what if we just also run the west half of the loop? Like people may not have enough time to do the full 430, might get more folks out. The main purpose was really to introduce people to the region, to get them to, just to know it and have an amazing experience and want to come back for more, really, in addition to just this race. So we added the 250, and that attracted additional folks who didn't have, 3, 4, or 5 days, could try to do it in a big weekend push, one push or 2 days or 3 days. And then what actually happened, which I can tell more about later, is a lot of the people who intended to ride the 430 ended up realizing maybe I was a bit too much and finishing on the 250. So there's a decision point where you can go either way, and that's that was a hard moment.
So I want to get my bearings for a minute. If you and I'm looking at the route, and you've got sort of the western area, and I'm looking at the track leaders map that I can kind of zoom in and out on, that's on bikepacking.com. So they've got sort of a green loop that's to the west, and then a red loop that is to the east, that goes out of Towanda and to the east. So obviously the 430, is all of that. But the 250, is that just the western loop, the green loop?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Okay.
There's a few additional miles you make to link the difference between the two loops, but they're basically the exact same thing until you're about 20, 30 miles from the end.
Right. Okay.
So everybody's following the same track and, interacting for the first day or so, or first, 150, 200 miles. And as people start to spread out.
You can see that little pinch point that, where the 250 just skirts along the Susquehanna and then joins back up with what would be the finish for the full as well. So that's cool. And so they had a little bit of time there to sort of think about that before they got to that decision point, which way they were going to go.
Yeah. And we asked people if they intended to race or they intended to just tour the route. And that was a category as well. So if you were in tour mode, weren't really mad. We weren't worried about, are you on course? Are you following the rules? Are you just having a good time? That's great.
Right.
And anyone who switched courses, deviated from the race plan, was automatically switched to tour mode. It was awarded a finisher status as a tour.
Gotcha. Now, approaching something like this, what are the things, because this was just run, so it's a September window, and Northeast Pennsylvania in September can, I think, go one of two ways. It can either be beautiful or it can be rainy and really chilly. How did folks approach this from a race perspective with what they carried, what they, what did it look like?
Yeah, it varied. It varied. I mean, some folks who were more experienced and going for broke basically took nothing, saw it as a day ride on both distances. A lot of people did not take sleep systems, but I believe most people packed rain gear. Originally, the forecast looked like perfect, completely clear for 5 to 7 days, and then it shifted. And the first 2 days were almost perfect. We had a little thunder and rain the first night. But then after that, days 3 onward, for the people who were still out there, had kind of steady, intermittent, cool rain for the rest of it. And that was a challenge. And I think that affected some people's, persistence to finish or not. But yeah, the fall's tricky. And like you see, this major storm came up the East Coast, right on the tail end of this.
Yeah.
This was a little beyond the reach of it, but yeah, it's pretty significant. I mean, the thunderstorms, the flooding, you had to think about all of that. And we were ready to adjust, of course, the course and the plan for the riders if anything became too much, but it did hold out.
How many folks did you actually have enter the Grand Depart?
We had 30 on track leaders, and we had a few others that jumped in just from the local community, and we're just sort of touring at the same time, which is pretty solid for the first year. We thought we had about 40 sign up, and then last minute, a few people always have issues. A few people got sick, COVID, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was pretty solid for such a long course, and most of them, I think all but 7 or so, were trying for the long distance.
Okay. Now I'm kind of familiar with the area. I was actually trying to run something in the spring up in Canton, out of our mutual friend Eric Schoonover's house at Rockert, which you have stayed at Rockert. I would recommend folks that the Rockert on Airbnb is right in the middle of some of very, very beautiful roads to ride a bike. So if you're not looking to bike pack, if you're looking for a little luxury experience, that might be a good place to look. But I go up there. I've done it twice now for the Tour de Chunk that the Canton Cycling Club puts on in September, and I'm just, both times I've walked away with so impressed with how beautiful it is, but also how great the people are. It just really feels like a nice little pocket of undiscovered. In my opinion, I think probably undiscovered, really beautiful cycling in Pennsylvania. Because I think you've got that Grand Canyon and Wellsboro and little Pine Creek and that whole area over there a little bit further, like you said, to the west. And it just kind of gets skipped over maybe. So it's great to see something go right through the middle of all of that and really help share that.
Yeah, and I mean, Eric has driven that area cycling scene so much. I mean, the Canton Cycling Club, Eric and Frank out of Canton rode out with the group that first day, and a lot of the route in that area Eric drew up himself, and then Donna did the next section. Okay. And so people were blaming me for the hills. I said, you should blame Eric. You should blame Donna.
Did you do that crazy Soper Hill? Was that on the course? Because he takes us out. I don't know. It's this.
The Armenia Mountain is the real big one right there.
Okay, yeah, that's the one he takes us out onto, and we climb out and go up this crazy hill, which I have yet to tackle. I've attempted it twice now, and I think part of it is I know that I've got a big event the next day, and I'm not going to burn too many matches trying to get up a hill when everybody else is obviously already going to be gone anyway, and they're not going to see me walk. So it's all good. It's fine. It's just such a gorgeous area, though, and that time of year, it's wow. Really, really tremendous. Really tremendous. Now, are there plans for more endless mountain challenges?
Yeah, we're talking about it, and I think stay tuned for an announcement really soon here, but it looks like it's going to run again probably the same weekend next year.
Excellent.
Almost everybody who came out wanted to come back again. A lot of people have unfinished business, and they'll do a better assessment of kind of the level of the challenge, I think.
Right.
It was a lot harder than most people expected.
Well, we haven't even done the numbers yet. How much elevation is there on the 430?
People were recording 45 to 47,000 feet.
Holy cow!
So
Holy
it's
cow!
pretty unrelenting. And yeah, this is like Eric likes to call it death by 1,000 climbs or something, like the way it works.
Yeah, I would say.
Yeah, we had some pretty heavy hitters. I mean, Jesse Stauffer took the win. We'll talk about this later probably, but Abe and Ramsey were right on his tails the whole time. But it's like you don't really get much recovery. You go up a steep hill, it's not super high. We're talking 200 to 600 feet vertical, but then you shoot right down it in a minute, and then you just start up the next one. Right. And that's kind of what characterized a lot of the course as a race. And if you're touring and you're spinning those out and taking your time, I mean, that's kind of a different experience, though it's still challenging.
Right.
But
right.
As a race, it's a tough race. And people who've done hard races like Arkansas and TNGA, like Abe was saying, it's up there. It's tough mile per mile. Wish they had even mountain bike tires sometimes, although it generally runs pretty fast. It's pretty smooth. People had mixed opinions on tire size. Some people were, I'm fine with 38. Some people are like, I wish I had a 2.0.
Okay.
But I think the racers wanted bigger tires just for comfort over the single push kind of thing.
And I have flipped over. I'm kind of following some of the resources on my screen as we're chatting. And one of the questions that I was going to ask was about some sort of a guide, but now I'm landed on the Ride with GPS that I'm finding through the Endless Mountain Heritage website, which is at emheritage.org, and the Ride with GPS map has everything you're going to need. It's got hotels, it's got camping, it's got food, it's got things that are close to course, off course, all over the place. So if folks were looking to do even just pieces of this, and this is one of those things that I look at something like this, and you're right, it's a huge ask for 430 miles from an effort standpoint and also a time standpoint. But, people do the Great Divide in sections and segments. And this is something that's really readily available here on the East Coast. So just because you don't have to think about it as being that whole effort. You could go out there and tackle 80 or 100 miles in a weekend. There's plenty of resources, figure out that transport back and forth, and have a great weekend.
Yeah, and we added a really in-depth resupply spreadsheet too. If you go to the Instagram page, Endless Mountains Bikepacking, you'll see a lot of content from the race this last week. But there's also links to that spreadsheet and to a bunch of other resources that kind of make it really approachable. So we wanted to give all the riders that up front so they all have that information. They don't have to spend tons of time trying to track down that. And then they can make a plan and a second plan and a third plan when things change. All that information. And I mean, maybe worth just noting, there are plans next year to develop a bunch of shorter routes throughout this whole region. A bunch of day rides out of different hubs, places like Canton, like, Loyal Sock. And these places people ride a lot, but not just see it as, you don't have to come out and just ride 250 or 430 miles. There's a bunch of 30-mile loops, 50-mile loops, 80-mile loops. You come out for a long weekend. And I'll send
you my links. Eric and I put together, when I was thinking of doing that thing out of Canton, I put, with Eric's help, again, I think it was 4 different routes that all hub and spoked out of Canton that were just like that. There was a 17-mile sort of warm up, and then everything else was like a 30 or a 35 or a 40 that went into some of the state game lands. Which, obviously, when I was trying to organize that from a group perspective with an organized ride, I had to talk to the state game lands folks about timing and permission and all of the permits and everything that go along with it. But from a going out on finding a route and going out and just doing it, there's a lot less involved with that. So and it's beautiful. Absolutely. I did drive some of them.
Yeah. Some people are like, I'll just going to come back and camp and bike around and just spend some time there after this event. Wanted to not rush it. Right, just enjoy being there.
Now, what are the big towns that we're talking about? We've got obviously Towanda. We've already mentioned Canton, which is sort of all the way to the west. Towanda's sort of in the middle, so to speak, of the figure eight. What are some of the other big areas so people might want to begin to associate some names of some places if they
Yeah,
come
it's
to
a good
you?
question. If they're associated, um, yeah, you have like, well, the state parks in the west. We've mentioned Loyal Sock and is it Land's End, World's End? Sorry,
Okay, yeah, yep.
World's End. So people familiar with those areas. Other towns, LaPorte is one there. A lot of these are small towns. Probably the biggest town it goes through is Tunkhannock on the Susquehanna towards the southeast corner.
Okay.
And then it goes up to Uniondale to where the rail trail starts on the east.
I'm seeing like
Follows that up.
Athens
Sorry,
up there to the north. I see that as well.
northwest,
Yeah.
Athens and Sayre, bordering New York State.
Hey, you almost
Um,
get into New York if folks wanted to take a little side journey, a little side quest. They could very easily, I think, make this a two-stater
yeah,
and
it's
hop
true.
across the
Yeah,
line.
you touch it up in the northeast too, near
Yeah,
Halstead. You could cross the river into to New York.
so
But
close.
it's a lot of small towns. It's a lot of places people probably haven't visited before who
Hmm.
aren't familiar with this area. It's a little beyond the Poconos. Um, and I mean, if you look at the state map and the gravel roads on the GIS, this part of the state has like one of the highest densities of unpaved roads.
Yeah.
And it's kind of amazing how much of it there really is in this area.
I have looked at that map before, and you're absolutely right. It almost looks like when all the gravel roads are orange on the map, it almost looks like that little area just turns orange. It's
Turns on.
it's
Yeah.
that depending upon how far out you are zoomed in or zoomed out on that map. I've actually noted that before. It's fascinating. It's fascinating. Again, and undiscovered, relatively undiscovered.
Mhm.
I think we're
For gravel cycling, I think so too.
yeah.
And I think this event really helped put it on the map for a lot of people. It's it's not very far from New York City, from Philadelphia, from Harrisburg, just a couple of hours. DC is not that far.
Yeah.
And with the loop, you can always jump on at any point too.
Hmm.
If it's easier to, you come from New York, you want to go to Scranton and then just jump on that east side. That works pretty well too.
Now let's talk a little bit about how the race actually played out. You threw some names out there. I want to give folks, some credits because I guess they're all whoever finished at the top of their categories has all got FKTs right now. They're all sitting on them, correct?
That
So,
is correct.
and that's something maybe. Well, let's touch on the names of the folks that were there first. Let's dive into that.
Sure. I mean, well, we had about 30. We had individual categories, we had teams, we had no one took up to single speed, so that one's still out there. And then we had the
Ah,
two distances. But yeah, we had folks from all over the Northeast. We had someone from Atlanta, we had people from Connecticut. Most are from PA and New York, I would say.
okay,
But Jesse Stauffer is probably the most local guy. That was sort of at the pointy end. Abe and Ramsey are friends from Virginia. Ramsey's in DC. Abe's in Harrisonburg. Abe has the FKT for Arkansas High Country, TNGA, Trans Virginia.
okay,
Goes
great.
fourth,
Yeah, that's a
fourth and
name. That's a name I'm
five.
familiar with. I'm
You
familiar with
know
that.
Abe.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
I don't know,
and
but
yeah,
it's a name. It's
I
a
mean, I
name I'm
don't
familiar with.
know if you want me to go through all of them, but those three guys
No, no.
were tearing through the night on the 430 route. I mean, so Abe and Ramsey were a team, and Jesse was solo,
Okay.
and like everyone was kind of emerged together, but then they just kept pulling ahead and ahead, and they ended up. It was very close in the end. Jesse finished 12 minutes ahead of Abe and Ramsey. 43 hours in, I believe, was the final time. I should double check that, but yeah, it was a day and 18 hours, and this was amazing for the people from the region to watch, and because this is a pretty new thing
Mm.
for a lot of parts of the country, and even the organizers of this route in the beginning, they're like, we thought people would take a week to get through it, and then people are taking like a day and 18 hours to do 430 miles. Is kind of amazing. But through the night, they were kind of leapfrogging a bit. Jesse's tracker wasn't working for a while. We weren't always sure where he was. I was running a media crew and chasing down riders and getting stories and interviews. But yeah, if you do the replay, you can see that those three kept going quite a bit ahead. And I think Abe and Ramsey, like being a team, kind of made a little better time through the night.
Okay.
I think they kind of kept each other going a little more. But then Jesse would kind of pull ahead the first morning. And then at the end, and towards the end, Jesse, I think, really just pushed it in. And Abe and Ramsey were trying to chase him, but couldn't quite get there.
Couldn't quite get there.
It was 3 a.m. they pulled in. And then they were hot on Jesse's heels, but they were all pretty delusional and messed up.
What about the women's side?
So the women's side, so we had Joanna Friesen won the 250, and she rode one push through the night and finished the following afternoon.
Okay.
Let's see what I'd have to pull up all the times,
but
she was second. She was of the people who intended to race the 250. She was the first person in. She holds the FKT at 30 hours.
Yeah, so say 1 day, 6 hours. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And she beat all of the men in the 250 category.
Hot dog! I love to see that. Fantastic.
In the 250.
Okay.
And then Christine Stone of Connecticut was the sole contender for the 430 in the women's category, and she intended to tour. She told me, but then she realized if she completed the route as a racer, she would win and get the FKT. So she decided to just take her good old time. It's a very hard course. And she held strong and pushed through some rain, and then took that win and has that FKT as well.
Nice.
Yeah.
Now FKTs. Were there any non-binaries? Do you have any non-binaries?
We did not have anyone enter that category.
Okay, sure. Gotcha. FKTs is something I think that a lot of us, at least I am, sometimes confused by. Does an FKT have to come out of an organized grand depart, or what are the requirements if somebody wanted to go out and say to try to do this by themselves? So
yeah, as I understand, technically no. An FKT is what it is. It's the fastest known time on a course. It's different than the race. I mean, if you enter a race within the parameters of the race, that's one thing. But FKTs usually are for a certain style of riding. Am I supported? Am I self-supported? This kind of thing. So we gave Justin Wolf the FKT on the 250, but not the win, because he was going to do the 430. He wasn't feeling well, and then he was pretty far ahead. And then he decided, I'm going to try to just ride the 250 in.
Gotcha.
So he actually rode that course faster than anyone in any other men's contender for that ever, but it wasn't his race. So he technically scratched from his race, but we recognize that he has the fastest known time for the 250. And he was just like an hour ahead of Joanna, roughly.
Yeah, that makes sense. I guess that makes sense. It's not about winning the race. It's about doing exactly what FKT stands for, and that's making it the fastest known time.
Right. And technically, a grand depart's supposed to be a mass start of independent time trials. Like everyone's racing the course, they're racing the clock.
Right.
They just start at the same time. So, I mean, yeah, that's why people start ITPs for FKTs, and that's a way to sort of just use the system to verify that too.
Okay.
Get some dot watchers.
Any additional shout out? Any sponsors or anybody come to the table to kind of help? I know it's all self-supported, so you're not setting up aid stations and all this other kind of stuff. But I mean, there's got to be people that kind of help make something happen.
Yeah, well, the Endless Mountains Heritage Region, I mean, they are the ones who really put this route together and drove it along. I mean, they were a huge help with Kane Chamberlain, the director, Robin, Jill, Marcy, all those folks from the ground really helped welcome people in and helped get the word out. We strongly encouraged trail magic, actually. We started to think about, can trail magic be a foundation of this event to connect it to the local communities? Dave Pryor from Unpaved came out with the Canton Cycling Club and set up sort of pop-up trail magic station. Donna was roaming around on her bike and in her truck doing sort of pop-up trail magic. Some races really say no trail magic, like could discourage it because it's not completely even. But we were like, you know what, let's just make this a little more fun. And, you know, if anything, the guys who are and women who are going to set these FKTs, this Trail Magic's only going to slow them down. Probably they'll get stuck somewhere and they won't want to keep going. But what was really fun out of this event is like different people like kept hearing about the race and they just started making their own Trail Magic aid stations. Like they didn't even know about it until it started. And then cyclists just kept going by their house. So there was this guy named Dennis on the Far East Side. He was on like Leadville, Ironman kind of stuff, I think. He got his grandkids to write up signs, to set up coolers, tents.
Nice.
And he just watched the tracker map, and as people would come, he'd hide in the woods and yell at them and cheer them on and freak them out. And then he'd ride his e-bike with them up the steepest hill on the whole route, which, like, I don't know, Abe told me, like, this guy almost burned him out. Like, he was trying to keep up with his e-bike. But it's like it's a mile that goes up 600 some feet. It's crazy steep. Like, you almost tip over. But yeah, so we had a lot of that stuff, which was super fun. And like, kind of kept thinking, like, maybe this is one of the hardest routes out there of this style of gravel, but like, you know, the communities are like the best, has the best Trail Magic, the Trail Angels. And like, you know, we'd hear in the diners in the small towns, like as the support, you know, as the media crew, I was kind of running, like people talking about, you hear there's hundreds of these guys out there. And like, they didn't really know what's going on, but they, you know, then we'd share the tracking map with them. They get super excited. And some of these people were skeptical of the event. I think initially they didn't really know what it was. And then they started to see it really happening and they got really behind it. So I'm pretty excited about doing it again, because I think we could reach out to so many more people. We could really get the communities involved. And like for the riders, these interactions with the local folks living along the route were some of the biggest highlights and points of encouragement.
You know, it's interesting. It's sort of not the same thing, but when back in the spring when I did parts of the Grayson route with some folks, and I was doing sort of vehicle support. It ended up being a little bit off from what I had initially planned that event or ride to look like, but it worked out great. It worked out perfectly. It worked out exactly the way that it should have. So I was in a vehicle and I was meeting my riders along the way. And so I'd go into the Grayson Highlands store and I was talking to the folks in there. I was like, you know, I had a lot of time to kind of sit around and chat, and I was asking them, I was like, the impact of bikes. Have you seen more people on bikes? And there were so many people who were like, yeah, you know, it's funny that I think somebody built some sort of a route thing that goes by here. So yeah, in the last couple of years, we've seen more people on bikes, and it's just interesting. And I think that gives the bike community so much exposure to a local community that may not see them. And I think that's one of the things that gravel is really, really strong at. So this is just, you know, great thing. And doing sort of like that big grand part in that, not just making a route and plopping it out there for people, but actually building something that has some excitement that you can really get the community kind of jazzed about. That's cool. And I saw some of the pictures from Dave's little pop-up surprise thing that Dave put out. So that's pretty exciting.
I would encourage you, check out the Instagram. We did pretty thorough like storytelling with rider interviews. We did a Rigs of series. We did a bunch of sort of, you know, tell the story content, because that's what got everybody so excited. Not just, I mean, the riders, it's like their friends and families are following along. And then it's all these people from the community that are like, who are these crazy people that are riding across these 4 counties on these super steep hills that, you know, we couldn't even imagine riding a bike up. That these people got so excited, and then, you know, just to be able to be a part of that virtually through Instagram, through track leaders, like that was, I don't know, it's a really special thing for a lot of these folks.
I will make sure to drop a link to the Instagram. In fact, I want to get a whole laundry list of links to drop into the show notes. So anything that you could think of, David, just fire off back to me with an email. So I got one more thing before we wrap this up. I've taken a lot of grief here the last few weeks because I had sort of abandoned the this or that's that we do. And I'm sure you're familiar with what we do, but I've taken a lot of grief because I wasn't necessarily sure how people liked or disliked the volume of time that we took. So I got one this or that, and it's going to be appropriate for you. New River Trail or Virginia Creeper? If you had to go one way or the other.
Virginia Creeper is, I don't know.
Yeah.
It's an old favorite.
Yeah.
It's the end of the Trans-Virginia route. I don't know. Something special about that one.
There's something special about Damascus. There's for sure something special there.
All roads lead to Damascus. So.
And I had so much fun on the trip that we did. I'm going to go with Virginia Creeper as well. I've done it more probably than I've done New River, but the Virginia Creeper Trail campground at White Top.
Mm-hmm.
What a fantastic little gem of a place. We stayed there the first night we went out. And if I had to do that over again, although I have a feeling with all of the trestle bridges that are gone now, I think it's going to be a while before New River's a part of anything. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure how that's all going to play out. But Virginia Creeper Trail campground at the top of White Top, fantastic. Just a great little place. Really, really loved our stay there. So Virginia Creeper for me as well. And again, heart goes out to the folks in Damascus, and they'll reach a point out there, friends in gravel bike country, where we're going to need to support some places like that. So let's keep that in mind. Anything else, David, from your end before we shut it down?
No, I think just I hope to see people up there in Pennsylvania. There's a lot of great stuff happening in gravel scene in Pennsylvania too, and the whole region's really coming together. So when we see these tragedies, it's really cool to see the community, the broader bike community, support the community's routes go through. And I think for me, that's really what it's all about. So stay engaged, stay connected, and there's more to come.
Well, thank you again, David, for joining me and for chatting about all this. Thank you for all the work that you're out there doing for the gravel community, building routes and building things and building excitement. It's fantastic, and it is really appreciated. I think everybody understands that you put a lot of time, effort into the things that you do, and just want to make sure that we all appreciate it.
Thank you too.
Let's shut this thing down for the week. Thanks, everybody, for listening to this episode of Mid-Atlantic Gravel, Travel, and Dirt. If you're looking to reach out to us, you can find us on the website, graveltraveldirt.com. Instagram is at Mid-Atlantic GTD. David, what is the Endless Mountains Instagram? I'm going to put a link in the show notes, but for folks who don't read those.
At Endless Mountains Bikepacking.
At Endless Mountains Bikepacking. That's the next one you're going to want to check out. Mid-Atlantic Gravel, Travel, and Dirt is recorded this week from right here in Southern Maryland all the way up to, where are you right now, David?
I'm in Harrisonburg, Virginia.
I know you go around all over the place, so I never know where you're going to come from.
Virginia, West Virginia, Pennsylvania. Kind of roaming, living on the road.
Thanks for riding along, everybody. Until next time, do good, be nice, go slow, respect others. Love you, bye.